Well, good morning. There is a sutta, teaching the Buddha gave that I'm really very fond of and have quoted from over the years. And it's quite long, so usually when I use it for teaching, I just pull an excerpt out of it and talk about that. It's usually in English called the water snake simile. And the simile of the water snake, which is not in what I'm going to talk about, but just to say, is that he talks about if you wanted to capture, if you wanted to grasp a water snake, if you grasp it in the wrong place, let's say by the tail, you'll get bitten and poisoned, and it will be awful. And if you grab it in the right place, just in the back of the head, then it will be safe, and and you could do whatever it is that you were getting a water snake for. And he uses that to talk about how critical it is to grasp his teaching, the Dharma, correctly. That if you take, you know, if you take from it teachings that aren't the teachings he's actually teaching, then then you will be hurt, and it will be unpleasant. And if you take the teachings correctly, then you will have, quite a lot of development in the direction of freedom, of true freedom, freedom from, the constancy of being upset by anxiety, angst, tension, discontent. So one of the very, very favorite pieces, which is really a favorite for lots of people, is the Buddha tells the story in which he compares developing your skill in the Dharma to building a raft. And he compares moving from a life filled with confusion and upset to a life filled with clarity and calm, as crossing a river. And so the Buddha asked his students, suppose a student who has achieved awakening, having gathered grass, twigs, branches, and leaves, having bound them together to make a raft, crosses over to safety on the far shore through dependence on that raft. Having crossed over to the far shore, the student might think, how useful this raft has been to me, for it was through dependence on this raft that I was able to cross over to safety on the far shore. Why don't I carry it on my back while I go forth on this side of the river? What do you think, monks, the Buddha said, would a student in doing that be doing what should be done? And the students replied, no. And the Buddha continued, and what should the student who has achieved awakening do? In order to be doing what should be done with the raft. In this case, the student, having crossed over to the far shore, would think, how useful this raft has been to me, for it was in dependence on this raft that I have crossed over to safety on the far shore. Why don't I, having dragged it on dry land, now go wherever I like. In doing this, the student would be doing what should be done. So what is the Buddha saying here? There are two things to point out. There are some people, and this is where the simile of the water snake comes in. There are some people who grasp this teaching and say, oh, it means once I'm awake, I have no need of the Dharma. I have no need of a practice. I can let all that go. And the Buddha would say, no, that's not what I'm teaching. What I'm teaching is freedom from clinging. What it's saying is that the student who has achieved awakening, what should the student do with all the Dharma they have developed and mastered? They should not carry it around as a burden. They should release. The Dharma is now embodied in their actions. This is why the Buddha says, having dragged the Dharma onto dry land and letting it go, can now go wherever I like, because the ethical base of the Dharma has been embodied. That's a pretty amazing thing, to realize that the goal of this practice is a freedom to go wherever you like, having truly embodied these teachings, being these teachings, living these teachings, freely moving from whatever is occurring to whatever is occurring to whatever is occurring to whatever is occurring to whatever is occurring. Not clinging. So then the Buddha goes on to say something about the nature of self-identity. And I think it has a couple of very astounding lines in it. So I'm going to read this part. One hears the Buddha or the Buddha's students teaching the Dharma for the elimination of all views, determinations, biases, inclinations, and obsessions, for the stilling of all fabrications, for the relinquishing of all acquisitions, for the ending of craving and clinging, for the arising of disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, unbinding. What the Buddha is saying in this paragraph is that our sense of self, moment to moment, is dependent on our views, our determinations, our biases, our inclinations, our obsessions, our fabrications, our acquisitions, our craving, and are supported by enchantment and passion and clinging. Unbinding is the release from all of this. The release of views, the release of determinations, the release of biases, the release of inclinations and obsessions, the stilling of all fabrications, the relinquishing of all acquisitions, the ending of craving, the arising of disenchantment, of dispassion, of cessation. This is freedom. This is unbinding. And then the Buddha goes on to say, and basically saying to someone who is having some success, even if just for a moment, at developing these qualities, the Buddha goes on to say, the thought might occur to one, so it might be that I will be annihilated. So it might be that I will perish. So it might be that I will not exist. And then one does grieve, is tormented, does weep, beat their breast and grow delirious. It is thus that there is agitation over what is not present, either internally or externally. So what is the Buddha saying in this paragraph? Many of us have had an experience of really deepening in our practice to the point where the sense of self-identity really thins out, may even dissipate for a moment. And many of us having that experience discover we get frightened. We have a lifetime of dependence, of leaning, of holding on to a self-identity. And when, through the efforts in our practice, that self-identity falls away, it might be that you feel like you're being annihilated, that you're dying, that you won't exist. And so grief or torment or total confusion could arise. And the piece that the Buddha is saying is that this agitation arises over something that doesn't exist, either internally or externally. This sense of a permanent self, this sense of an eternal soul, this sense of something that is continuous from childhood through adolescence, through the decades of our lives. These views, these determinations, these biases, these inclinations, these obsessions around our self-identity is agitation over something that is actually not present. Not present internally, not present externally. So then the Buddha says something that I think is incredibly compassionate. Because the Buddha just said, self-identity is a fabrication. It's a story. It's a thought process. Self-identity is not actually present, neither internally nor externally. So imagine the audience is now frightened, as the Buddha said that would occur. And the Buddha then says, monks, you would do well to possess a wanted possession, the possession of which would be constant, permanent, eternal, not subject to change, that would stay just like that for eternity. What? Did the Buddha just say that? The Buddha did. The Buddha said, you would do well. You would do well to possess a wanted possession, the possession of which would be constant, permanent, eternal, not subject to change, that would stay just like that for eternity. Then the Buddha goes on to say, but do you actually see any such possession anywhere in the world, internally or externally? Do you see any possession which would be constant, permanent, eternal, not subject to change, that would stay just like that for eternity? No. There is no such thing. Ah, very good. The Buddha then says, I too do not envision a possession, the possession of which would be constant, permanent, and eternal, not subject to change, that would stay just like that for eternity. Then the Buddha goes on. You would do well to cling to a doctrine of self. You would do well to cling to a doctrine of self when that clinging would not arise sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. You would do well to cling to a doctrine of self if that clinging would not cause suffering. But do you see a clinging to a doctrine of self, a clinging to which there would not arise sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair? No. I too do not envision a clinging to a doctrine of self, clinging to which there would not arise sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. And then the Buddha one last time says, you would do well to depend on a view which would not cause any sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, or despair to arise. You would do well to depend on a view that does not cause suffering. But do you see a view depending on which there would not arise sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair? No. Very good. I too do not envision a view depending on which there would not arise sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. So what is the Buddha saying in this? What is it that he's pointing out? He's saying that the raft that you are building to cross the river, the raft that you are building to get to the other side, the side where freedom abides, where it is unbound, and you are free to do whatever you like. The path to get there is the path of the elimination of all views, determinations, biases, inclinations, and obsessions, the stilling of all fabrications, the relinquishing of all acquisitions, the ending of craving, the arising of disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, all leading to unbinding from a sense of self. The Buddha is saying that if this is a path leading to the unbinding of a sense of self, and if the experience of unbinding from a sense of self creates fear, creates, oh my God, I'll be annihilated, I'll perish, I won't exist. When you get scared at the loss of a sense of self, the Buddha says, okay, take a look around. Because it would be great if you could have a sense of self that did not cause suffering. If you could cling to a sense of self that would not arise sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, you would be well done to cling to that. but it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing. This is the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's teaching is you have been born into a world, and the world is like this. The world is actually like this, just as it is. And all your wishing, all your stories, all your intentions and obsessions and creations and formations and fabrications, all that you create will not create something that does not exist. It simply creates little world bubbles that you try to live in that don't last. They only last for however many moments they last, and then they pop. And when they pop, grief is present, loss is present, sorrow is present, lamentation is present. I had it for a moment. For a moment, it was like so clear to me who I am. I was like, really, I got it. I got who I am. Where did it go? It never existed. It never existed. It was just a bubble you created, which is really quite beautiful that you're able to do such a thing. Don't be critical of the fact that we have this creative capacity. It's really astounding and delightful. There is no permanent possession. There is no permanent sense of self. There is no permanent view or understanding or comprehension. Everything changes. This is not your fault. You didn't create this. You were born here. You were born in a place where everything is changing. And the conditions, as they change the nature of how you feel, change the nature of what you think, change the nature of the state of your mind and heart and body, constantly changing. And in this constant change, there is definitely a desire. The Buddha said, wouldn't it be great if you could just hold on to something? He's acknowledging that of course you feel this way. Of course you're looking for a place to live that is paradise. Friends and partners to be with that are just like so comfortable and supportive and loving. Pursuits in life that are meaningful and deep. And of course you want all these things. And of course you want to find them and keep it just as it is forever. Why wouldn't you? Oh, right. Because it doesn't exist. That's why you wouldn't. Because you're just wasting your time. And you only have a very short time in this life. It's not very long in a universe that's billions of years old to live even 100 years. It's not very long. The Dalai Lama has a saying that he says, every morning when I wake up, I think to myself, I am alive and I have this precious human life. I'm not going to waste it. It's a beautiful statement. That's what the Buddha is saying. The Buddha is saying, don't waste this beautiful life that you have. on this beautiful planet that we live on. Don't waste it wishing for it to be different than it is. It is what it is. You have to work around what exists. And the Buddha has given us this path, this eightfold path, this beautiful path that is incredibly effective. It's a path from entanglement to freedom, a path from binding to unbinding. So our practice is really quite simple. Okay, it's not simple at all. Our practice really is a practice of letting go of enchantment, letting go of all of these stories about what we could be, what we could create, who we are, how we can hold on to things, all the stuff that we make up. And instead, our practice is to relax, to be content with what is, to be very active and engaged in the world, exactly as the world is, not as we wish that it was like this. Because of course we wish it was like this. This is what the Buddha is saying. Of course you wish for this. It's just look around. It doesn't exist. Work with what exists. Be present with what is. There is so much beauty and joy in what is. It's the disenchantment. It's the enchantment. It's like going into these bubbles that we create as though that was where happiness is. Happiness is not in a bubble that's going to pop. Happiness is in the world as it is. Happiness is in sitting in just this, content and joyous. This is the work of our practice. With the arising of whatever arisings, to say, hello, I love you. To rest in the presence of all that enters our sense doors. It feels like a nearly infinite amount of input is coming in all the time. It's the attempting to sustain a sense of self in the face of all the input that leaves us exhausted. When there's nothing to hold on to, when there is no clinging to a sense of self, the vastness of the flow of sensory input is a delight. Because we are not bound to any particular sensory input. I was thinking recently that I'm going to define equanimity as the love of everything. No matter what shows up, I'm in love. That's equanimity. Equanimity sometimes seems to be interpreted as not caring about anything. It's the opposite. It's caring about everything. Just being in love with what is presenting in your experience in this moment. So let's sit and do this. Let's actually do this. Let's get quiet and still and full of love and caring as everything that arises just is so wonderful, so deserving of our respect and our care.